on the roof, and then the response to that created across the wider anti-cuts movement.
Did you not regret, did you and your fellow protesters not regret finding yourself being involved in a protest that, let's face it, was ugly? It's going to damage the message that you're really trying to get through.
Well, I mean, the smashing of windows or something is what the media fixated on, and they tried to frame the entire discussion of the student movement around.
Well, we can only report on what we're seeing and what happens. If it happens, we're reporting it. We don't make it up.
Yes, but it's what the media chooses to focus on and make stories about.
That's
the real
true.
stories, well, I think that's the great opinion of a lot of students and the way that it was reported in the media afterwards. The real story isn't broken windows. The real story here is a broken public education system. It's not the smashing of windows, it's the smashing of the welfare state. That's the political story that's happening, and that is why this movement has grown just into tens of thousands of people in the space of just a few weeks.
Simon, thanks very much indeed for your time. Just to tell anyone who's looking in and seeing these slightly orangey clouds, and indeed some of these students who've got sort of jumpers tied around their face and masks, just to reinforce that despite claims by some students, police are not using tear gas. They say they do not use tear gas in local situations. Now, we've had a statement, or rather an interview, with the Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg at the BBC, who said he massively regrets finding himself in a situation where he had to break his promise. This is what you were hearing from Simon Hardy just a few moments ago. We're watching these scuffles now close to the police van as the crowd surges towards what they perceive to be the direction of Lib Dem headquarters, trying to get this letter through to Nick Clegg. Police pushing them back. It looks as if, I'm just trying to look, there is a kind of shield, if you look closely, that one of the officers is waving. He's using it primarily to push people back as that crowd surges towards them. It's about half an hour ago now that we saw this at barricades in another part of Whitehall, where they were having to use batons, sticks, against some of the students who were pushing against railings and throwing their own placards. There you go, another few sticks coming through at officers there.
Well, just picking up more on what Nick Clegg, the Deputy Prime Minister, had to say in reaction to these protests today. He said he is developing a thick skin. He did add, I hate in politics, as in life, to make promises that you then find you can't keep, obviously referring to the fact that they said that if they had gone into power at the last election, they wouldn't raise the cap on tuition fees. But the fact that he said developing a thick skin means he obviously remains unnerved by the scenes today. The letter Emily was talking about is a letter that brands Nick Clegg a liar, that protesters wanted to deliver to the Liberal Democrat headquarters in London. And that's why they're trying to push that police boundary, trying to make their way to the Liberal Democrats headquarters. At the moment, the police policy very much seems to be to keep them boxed in until they tire. And you can see more reinforcements coming through. And earlier we saw reinforcements of Riot Police on horseback making their way to this scene.
It's actually quite a small, concentrated crowd there. We can talk to Ian Watson, who'll give us a sense of the political ramifications, really, of this. And Ian, okay, we're going to leave Ian for a second, stay with some of these pictures, and Mike Sargent here. It's very hard, Mike, to get a true sense of just how big these numbers are, because you see certain areas where they're absolutely chock-a-block against the barriers, and then, for example, here a lot of police reinforcements, but definitely sort of gaps on the ground here that are not being filled by the protesters. Do you get a sense now, Mike, that people are trying to get out of the protest and they're unable to leave, or are they just trying to push the police back?
Yeah, I think some are trying to get out of the area. We've seen in the last few minutes crowds of what appear to be school children who had joined the demo or been sucked into it, running out. So obviously a lot of interest from from some of the younger people who've been here, and a lot of them, when things turned a little bit ugly, tried to get away and were rushing out of the scene, and particularly when missiles are thrown, fires are started and that sort of thing, any kind of alarm on the ground, and people are trying to move out of the area as quickly as they can. Still, we're just moving forward now into the main crowd, just a little bit behind the area where most of the protesters are still being boxed in to the end of Whitehall there, and most of them are not being allowed to come this way. They're just being kept down there by a police presence. But here on the fringes, you've got a surging backwards and forwards of crowds, some of them rushing away from what is happening down there at the police line, and then they'll stay back at the other end of Whitehall for a bit, and then they'll start to come forward to see what's going on again. So a lot of movement of people one way and another, and you can see that at the moment people are trying to move out of the main area, but still a very fluid situation, and lots of people on the sides of Whitehall standing on walls, watching from the sidelines, and a few objects being thrown on the fringes of this demonstration still.
Mike, it sounds like a silly question perhaps, but predominantly a young crowd then. I mean, you talked about some of the school children, the students. Do you get a sense there are any sort of tutors, teachers, older people involved in these protests?
Not many. I mean, of course, even 2 weeks ago we saw a large number of lecturers join the student protests, and there has been a measure of support from older people, from people professionally employed in education as well. But I think here on the ground we're talking about students, students at universities and those in other forms of higher education, and pupils at sixth form colleges. We see them here in quite large numbers again today, just looking around the crowd.
I think we might leave Mike on that note, but some interesting points being made. And just to give you an overall sense, when you're looking at it, anywhere that you see these bright yellow jackets of the officers, you tend to see the concentration of the crowds. That's because that is, to put it quite simply, where the crowds are trying to get. The police are blocking their movement through the protest. In other parts, if you go away from them, then there is, much lower concentration of protesters. We can talk to Ian now. Ian, we've been trying to get to you, I think, for the last 20 minutes, but events, dear boy, and all that. Just listening to Nick Clegg talking to Jeremy Vine a little while ago on Radio 2, I mean, he recognises that this is becoming sort of intensely personal, really, for him.
Becoming very personal for him. It could well be that a candidate from the National Union of Students stands against him in his Sheffield constituency on the grounds that he broke his pledge not to increase tuition fees, and indeed they're talking about standing against other Liberal Democrats. Every single Liberal Democrat MP, of course, signed that pledge before the election not to increase tuition fees if elected. Now in coalition, tuition fees could go up by threefold, and there may well be a political challenge, not just from the Labour Party, but from students against those Lib Dems that don't stick to their pledge. Now, some of them will stick to their pledge, some of them are absolutely determined to rebel against the coalition's plans to increase fees, but I don't think in sufficient numbers to make the government change its mind. Nick Clegg's argument, not just to the students if he managed to talk to them, but to his own MPs, his own backbenchers, to those who are very sceptical.
Ian, sorry to interrupt, Ian, we're just looking at pictures from our helicopter. We can see students being thrown or pushed back over a wall they're trying to clamber over. We believe many of them wanting to leave the boxed-in area where they've been protesting. The police have cordoned them, surrounded themselves around them to cordon them in, to tire them out, a very usual tactic that you find